Blue lights bloomed in Maya Thompson's rearview mirror like a warning flare she hadn't earned. She eased her car to the curb anyway, heart tightening as if it recognized a ritual before her mind did. The street was quiet, suburban manicured, safe-looking, lawns trimmed to obedience, porch lights glowing warm and indifferent. The officer approached slowly, hand resting near his belt. Maya watched him in the side mirror, noting the way his shoulders squared, the way his eyes skimmed her car and stopped on her face a fraction too long. She rolled the window down halfway. Cold air rushed in. "Evening," he said, not a greeting. "A test. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Maya blinked. "I live 3 blocks over." He leaned closer, flashlight cutting across her dashboard, her purse, her hands. Step out of the vehicle. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She thought of her mother's voice. Be calm, be polite, survive the moment. She unbuckled slowly, every movement deliberate, visible. "I haven't done anything wrong," Maya said, forcing steadiness into her tone. The officer's mouth twitched. "That's not for you to decide." The second cruiser pulled up behind the first, tires crunching softly against gravel. A door opened. Another presence. More weight. As Maya stepped on the pavement, the first officer tapped his chest camera. A small, almost careless gesture. "Just relax," he said quietly. "This'll go easier if you cooperate." The red light on the bodycam blinked to life. Maya realized, with a chill deeper than fear, that whatever happened next would not belong to her alone anymore. The siren chirped once, sharp and final, and Maya Thompson knew she wasn't imagining it anymore. She slowed, signaled, and pulled her car to curb, hand steady on the wheel despite the familiar tightness in her chest. "Okay," she murmured to herself. "Okay." The street was empty except for her car and the cruiser behind her. Blue lights washed over the houses, turning white siding into something colder, almost metallic. Maya checked her mirrors, then rested both hands at 10, and 2 like her father had taught her when she first learned to drive. The officer approached on the driver's side. He was white, mid-30s, maybe clean-shaven, expression neutral in a way that never actually meant neutral. "License and registration," he said. Maya handed them over. "May I ask why I was stopped?" He glanced at her license, then back at her face. "You were driving slowly." "I live nearby." "That's so." His eyes flicked toward the street behind her. "What's your address?" She gave it. He nodded, as if storing the information for later use rather than verification. "You nervous?" he asked. "No, you look nervous." "I was pulled over." The officer smiled faintly. "Step out of the vehicle for me." Maya hesitated for half a second too long. His smile disappeared. "Now." She opened the door and stepped onto the pavement, cold seeping through the soles of her flats. Another cruiser rolled up behind the first. A second officer got out, taller, broader, watching without speaking. "Any weapons on you?" the first officer asked. "No." "Mind if I check?" "Yes," Maya said, then corrected herself. "I mean, I don't consent, but I'm not resisting." The words tasted rehearsed, because they were. The officer exhaled sharply. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "For what reason?" "Suspicious behavior." Her throat tightened. "What behavior?" He didn't answer. He guided her wrists together, firm enough to hurt, not enough to bruise. Metal clicked closed. "This is ridiculous," Maya said quietly. "Relax." The second officer said for the first time. "You're making it worse." "I haven't done anything." "That's not what it looks like," the first officer replied. A red light blinked on his chest. The body cam. Maya noticed that the way someone notices a crack forming in glass. Small, potentially everything. "You don't live here," he said, more statement than question. "I do." "Funny," he replied. "Dispatch says this neighborhood's had break-ins." Maya laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "So you stopped me? You fit the description." "What description?" He paused. The silence stretched, thick and telling. The second officer shifted his weight. "Let's just run her." As the radio crackled to life, Maya stared straight ahead, jaw set, refusing to let them see her flinch. The camera kept blinking, recording, remembering, and for the first time since the lights came on, Maya felt something besides fear rise in her chest. Certainty. The holding room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a sharp, sour mix that clung to Maya's throat. The bench was bolted to the wall, cold metal pressing to the thin fabric of her dress. Her wrists were free now, but the absence of the cuffs felt temporary, like a pause instead of an ending. A clock ticked above the door, loud, intentional. An officer she hadn't seen before stepped in, tablet tucked under his arm. He didn't look at her right away. He scrolled, sighed, then finally lifted his eyes. "Maya Thompson," he said. "You understand why you're here?" "No," Maya replied. "I was stopped for suspicious behavior. No one's explained what that means." He nodded as if she confirmed something for him. "You were observed driving unusually slow in an area with recent criminal activity. So you detained me temporarily, handcuffed me, standard safety procedure." Maya let out a breath through her nose. "For who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he tapped the tablet. "You have any prior arrests?" "No." "Any outstanding warrants?" "No." "Drugs? Weapons? Anything we should know about?" "No." Each question landed with the same dull weight. Not curiosity. Confirmation. He paused, studied her face more closely now. "You get upset often when dealing with police, Miss Thompson?" Her jaw tightened. "Is that a serious question?" "I'm trying to understand your demeanor." "My demeanor," she repeated. "You pulled me over for no reason, handcuffed me on my own street, and you're asking why I'm upset." He gave a thin smile. "Let's keep this professional." Footsteps echoed in the hall outside. Laughter. Someone said something about dinner plans. Life moving normally, just beyond the door. The officer leaned back. "Look, this doesn't have to be a big deal." "It already is," Maya said. He shrugged. "If everything checks out, you'll be free to go. And if it doesn't?" He tilted his head. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." The door opened again. A woman in a wrinkled blazer stepped in, hair pulled back too tightly, eyes tired. She glanced at Maya, then at the officer. "I'm her public defender," she said quietly. "For now." Maya's chest loosened a fraction. "Thank you." The officer stepped aside but didn't leave. He crossed his arms, watching. "I've been briefed," the defender said, voice low. "They're saying you matched a vague description. No charges filed yet." "Yet," Maya echoed. The defender met her eyes. "My advice? Answer only what you must. Don't editorialize." Maya nodded, though frustration burned hot behind her ribs. Another officer poked his head in. "Sergeant wants an update." The first officer stepped into the hall. The door didn't fully close. Maya could hear them. "Anything on her?" "Clean so far." "She give you trouble?" "Smart mouth. Knows her rights." A pause. Then a chuckle. "Figures." Maya's stomach dropped. The defender's lips pressed into a thin line. "They always think they're whispering," Maya said softly. Minutes stretched. The clock kept ticking. Every second felt accounted for, logged somewhere she couldn't see. Finally, the first officer returned. His tone had changed, lighter, almost bored. "Looks like we're not pursuing this further," he said. "You're free to go." "That's it?" Maya asked. He raised an eyebrow. "You want to stay?" She stood, legs stiff. "Am I being charged with anything?" "No." "Then I want my property and a copy of the incident report." The officer hesitated. "Just a beat. You can request records through proper channels." "And the bodycam footage?" she asked. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance. Caution. "That's not up to me." Maya picked up her purse. "I'll be filing a complaint." He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "That's your right." As she walked out into the night, the air felt heavier than before. The streetlights buzzed softly. Somewhere behind her, a camera powered down. Procedure complete. Damage done. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, hands resting on the wheel, breathing through the tremor in her chest. They had let her go, but they had not let her be. Maya didn't sleep that night. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling as if it might replay the stop for her, freeze-frame the moment she'd missed, the word she should have said differently. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the blue lights blooming again, felt the cold click of metal around her wrists. By morning, exhaustion hardened into resolve. The Internal Affairs office was quieter than she expected. Beige walls, muted voices, a framed poster about community trust, hung slightly crooked near the reception desk. "I'm here to file a complaint," Maya said. The clerk, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and a practiced neutrality, slid a clipboard toward her. "Fill this out. Be as specific as possible." "I will," Maya replied. She wrote carefully, line by line. Times, words, gestures. The phrase suspicious behavior circled twice in black ink. When she finished, her hand ached. The clerk skimmed the pages, his brow furrowed, not in disbelief but recognition. "You're referring to the stop on Linden Street?" "Yes." He nodded once. Bodycam was activated. Maya's pulse jumped. "So there's footage." "There is," he said, then added quickly, "That doesn't mean—" "I know what it doesn't mean," Maya cut in. "I just need it to exist." He hesitated, lowered his voice. "It exists." That single sentence carried her through the next week. Days passed with no calls, no emails. At work, Maya went through the motions, answering questions that felt suddenly distant, like they belonged to someone else. Her co-workers were polite, cautious. One asked if she was okay. Another said nothing at all. At night, she watched the news obsessively. Every police press conference sounded the same. Careful language, passive voice, incidents that occurred. On the 8th day, her phone rang from an unknown number. "This is Daniel Reed." The voice said, "I'm a reporter with the City Ledger. I think you and I should talk." Her stomach tightened. "About what?" "About a traffic stop that doesn't look routine." They met in a coffee shop downtown. Daniel was younger than she expected, notebook already open, eyes alert but not hungry. "I saw a clip," he said. "Not officially released." Maya froze. "You saw the footage?" "Part of it. Enough to know it raises questions." "What kind of questions?" she asked. He met her gaze. The kind departments don't like answering. He didn't show her the video. He didn't need to. He described it instead. The pause before the order to step out, the lack of explanation, the moment the officer said, "You don't live here." "That's exactly what happened," Maya whispered. Daniel closed his notebook. "I want to run this, with your consent." Fear flared, bright and sharp. "What happens if I say yes?" "People will know your name." "And if I say no?" He shrugged gently. "Then it stays buried. For now." Maya thought of the officer's smile. The way procedure had swallowed her whole. "Run it," she said. The article dropped 2 days later. The headline didn't scream. It didn't need to. The video spoke for itself. Grainy, unfiltered, undeniable. Her calm voice. Their shifting explanations. The silence where justification should have been. By noon it was everywhere. Comments split like fault lines. Support poured in, fierce and validating. So did doubt. Why was she driving there? Why didn't she just comply? Why make this racial? The department released a statement calling the stop under review. The officers involved were placed on administrative duty. No mention of wrongdoing. No apology. Maya watched the footage alone on her laptop that night. Hearing herself speak from the screen was disorienting. She sounded steadier than she felt, braver. The red light blinked in the corner of the video, constant and patient. Proof. Her phone buzzed again. A message from the clerk at Internal Affairs. Sent from a personal number. "You were right to ask about the footage. Not everyone wanted it seen." Maya closed the laptop. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere distant, then faded. They had tried to control the story. The camera had chosen differently. The first thing Maya noticed was the quiet. Her phone, usually restless on the nightstand, lay still when she woke. No new notifications. No buzzing chorus of reactions. Just morning light slipping through the blinds and the faint hum of traffic outside. It didn't last. By the time she reached the kitchen, the phone erupted. Text stacked on text. Missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. A voicemail from her supervisor asking her to check in. Another from her mother, breathless with worry. Maya, baby, I saw the news. Please call me. The news, as if it were weather. At work, heads turned. Conversations paused, then resumed too quickly. Someone touched her arm in the hallway, whispered, "That was messed up," and disappeared before Maya could respond. Her manager closed the office door and spoke carefully, like navigating a cracked floor. "We support you," he said, "but things might get loud." They did. By noon, cable panels were debating her demeanor. A retired officer praised the department's restraint. Another analyst said the stop looked bad optically, as if justice were a lighting issue. Maya watched clips on mute, reading captions instead. Suspicious behavior, officer safety, compliance. The words recycled themselves until they lost meaning. Outside the building, a camera crew waited. Someone shouted her name. She kept walking. That night, she didn't turn on the television. She sat on the couch with the lights off, phone glowing in her hands. Messages from strangers scrolled past, gratitude, rage, solidarity, interspersed with threats. Go back where you belong. You're ruining good men's careers. Her chest tightened. She blocked one number, then another, then set the phone down, palms pressed flat against her knees. Silence, again. 2 days later, the department held a press conference. Maya watched online, alone. The chief stood stiffly at the podium. "We take these matters seriously," he said. "An internal review is ongoing." A reporter asked about racial profiling. "We don't have evidence to support that claim," the chief replied. Maya laughed once, sharp and bitter. "You have video," she said to the screen. "You just don't have honesty." Protesters gathered outside the precinct that weekend. Handmade signs, chants that rose and fell like waves. Maya didn't attend. She watched from her window as helicopters circled downtown on the news feed. Her mother came over with food she didn't eat. They sat side by side. "I'm proud of you," her mother said. Maya swallowed. "I didn't choose this." "No," her mother agreed, "but you're carrying it." On Monday, Daniel called. "They're trying to control the narrative," he said. "Union reps are pushing back." "I figured," Maya replied. "Would you consider an interview?" Fear sparked again, familiar now. On camera? Yes. She closed her eyes, thought of the red blinking light. Okay. The studio was bright, almost blinding. The host asked about her feelings, her tone, her intentions. "I want to go home," Maya said simply. "Instead, I became a lesson." The clip spread faster than the footage had. That night, as she scrolled through reactions, exhaustion finally pulled her under. She dreamed of standing in the street, lights flashing, unable to speak, while others narrated her life. She woke to another alert. Administrative hearing scheduled. Maya stared at the words until they steadied into focus. The noise wasn't fading. It was organizing. By the time the hearing date went public, Maya's name had become shorthand. Not a person, an argument. She saw it everywhere. On talk shows where hosts leaned back and asked loaded questions with careful smiles. On social feeds where strangers dissected her expressions frame by frame, as if her face were evidence and not a mirror fear. The police union released a statement first. It praised the professionalism of our officers and warned against trial by social media. Maya read it twice, then once more aloud. Listen how the words slid past accountability without touching it. Daniel texted her a screenshot. "They're lining up spokespeople." "I figured," Maya replied. Her thumbs hovered. "What do I do?" "Tell the truth," he wrote, "and let them argue with the camera." The interview requests multiplied. Some were polite. Others were predatory. One producer promised a balanced discussion, which Maya had learned meant she would be balanced against someone denying her experience. She chose one outlet, a local station. Live, no edits. In the green room, she paced. A makeup artist asked if she wanted powder. Maya shook her head. "I want to look like myself." When the red light came on, the host smiled warmly. "Maya, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me." Some viewers say this incident is being misunderstood. They argue the officers were just doing their job. Maya met the camera. Then their job needs changing. The host blinked. Can you elaborate? I was stopped for existing, Maya said. For driving while black in a place that made someone uncomfortable. That's not misunderstanding. That's pattern. Online, the clip ignited. Supporters clipped her lines and shared them with captions like, "Say it again, and this is what courage looks like." Critics accused her of grandstanding, of weaponizing race, of trying to get rich off outrage. At work, HR sent an email about safety concerns. Maya was advised to work from home temporarily. The word landed heavy. She hadn't asked for protection. She'd been given isolation. Her neighbor stopped her in the hallway. "You're brave," the woman said, voice hushed. "But you know how these things go." Maya nodded. She did know. That was the problem. The union held a press event of its own. Officers stood in a line, arms crossed, faces solemn. A spokesperson spoke about morale, about danger, about the split-second decision civilians couldn't understand. Maya watched on her laptop, hands curled into fists. "They understand," she whispered. "They just don't care." That night, a message arrived from an unknown number. "You should have kept your mouth shut." Her chest tightened. She blocked the number. Then another appeared. "Careful. Not everyone likes cameras." She shut the phone off and sat in the dark, counting her breaths until the tremor eased. The next morning, Daniel called with urgency in his voice. "We got something." "What?" "Discrepancies," he said. "The officers' written reports don't match the footage." Maya's heart kicked. "How bad?" "Bad enough that they're rewriting the story." At the hearing, the room was packed. Lawyers, observers, a few uniformed officers in the back. Maya took her seat, spine straight, hands folded. The first officer testified calmly, confidently. He described a suspicious vehicle, a nervous driver, a safety concern. Then the footage played. The room shifted. The pause before the command. The absence of explanation. The moment he said, "You don't live here," the officer swallowed. His jaw tightened. The panel asked questions. He answered, then corrected himself, then hesitated. The second officer took the stand and contradicted him. Slightly, but enough. Maya watched, pulse steady now. This was no longer just her word. Outside, reporters waited. Inside, the system bent under the weight of its own record. The hearing adjourned without a verdict. More review, more time. But as Maya stood to leave, she caught the eye of the first officer. For a split second, the power dynamic inverted. He looked away. The narrative war wasn't over, but it had cracks now, and cracks let light in. The room smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, like a courtroom that wanted to pretend it wasn't one. Maya took her seat at the long table, back straight, hands folded, eyes forward. Across from her, the officers sat with their lawyers, uniforms crisp, expressions carefully blank. The chair of the panel cleared her throat. "We're here to continue the administrative review regarding the stop of Ms. Maya Thompson." Administrative. Review. The word softened the edges of what had happened. Filed the fear down to something manageable. The first officer was called again. He stood, adjusted his belt, and raised his right hand. "Do you stand by your written report?" The panelist asked. "Yes," he said quickly. Too quickly. The panelist nodded. "You stated Ms. Thompson appeared evasive." "Yes." "In the footage, she answers every question calmly." Another panelist said. "Can you explain that discrepancy?" The officer's jaw worked. Calm could be deceptive. A murmur rippled through the room. Maya felt heat rise in her chest, but kept still. This wasn't about convincing them anymore. It was about letting the record speak. The footage played again. The camera angle shook slightly as the officer shifted his weight. The audio was clear. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question echoed louder in the hearing room than it had on the street. The panel paused the video. "Why did you ask that?" The officer hesitated. "Context." "What context?" "Recent break-ins." "Did you have a description?" "No." "So why Miss Thompson?" Silence stretched thin. The officer glanced at his lawyer, then back at the panel. She matched the area profile. Maya's breath caught. Area profile. A phrase designed to say everything without admitting anything. The second officer was called next. He testified with more caution, choosing his words carefully. Too carefully. You stated you were concerned for officer safety, the panelist said. Yes. Yet you never observed a weapon. You never called for backup until after the stop escalated. The second officer swallowed. Situations evolve. Did they evolve? The panelist asked. Or did they escalate? The question hung unanswered during a break. Maya stood by the window, watching people cross the plaza below, unaware of how close justice sometimes came to slipping past unnoticed. Daniel stood beside her. They're boxed in, he whispered. They always had a door, Maya replied. They just didn't think they'd need it. The hearing resumed with expert testimony. A former department trainer spoke about policy, about reasonable suspicion, about how words like suspicious behavior were meant to be specific, not convenient. The union lawyer objected. The panel overruled. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, recognition. When Maya was called to speak, she stood slowly. The room quieted. I'm not here because I hate the police, she said. I'm here because I expect them to follow their own rules. A panelist asked, How has this affected you? Maya paused, chose honesty over performance. I don't drive at night anymore, she said. I second-guess every turn. I rehearse conversations that shouldn't need rehearsing. She looked at the officers. You went home that night. I brought it with me. The chair thanked her. The hearing concluded with a promise of findings in due course. Outside, cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. Do you feel justice will be served? A reporter asked. Maya considered the question. I feel the truth is documented, she said. What you do with it is up to you. Days later, the findings were released. Policy violations. Failure to articulate reasonable suspicion. Conduct inconsistent with departmental standards. The first officer was suspended without pay. The second received a formal reprimand. Mandatory retraining ordered. Policy review announced. It wasn't everything. It wasn't nothing. Maya read the report slowly, absorbing each line. Her name appeared again and again, clinical and precise. That night, she drove Linden Street for the first time since the stop. She parked where it had happened and sat with the engine off. The street looked the same. Quiet, ordinary. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. I'm proud of you. Maya typed back, I'm tired. She rested her head against the seat, eyes closed, breathing steady. The system hadn't collapsed. It had shifted, just enough to reveal its seams. Change, she realized, didn't always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it came as a paper trail. And sometimes that was enough to begin. The consequences arrived quietly, the way bills did, slipped into inboxes, summarized in statements, stripped of drama. There was no siren, no apology delivered face-to-face, just official language announcing decisions that would ripple outward whether anyone acknowledged them or not. Maya read the department's press release 3 times. Suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, policy review. Each phrase felt both heavy and insufficient, like weights measured on a scale that had never been calibrated for harm. Daniel called an hour later. It's more than they usually give. I know, Maya said. That doesn't mean it's enough. Public reaction fractured immediately. Some headlines framed the outcome as accountability. Others called it overcorrection. Comment sections boiled. They ruined his life. Finally, consequences. This is why cops won't do their jobs. Maya closed the browser. She couldn't carry every opinion anymore. At the grocery store, a woman stopped her near the produce aisle. Thank you, she said softly. My son, he's 15. This matters. Maya nodded, throat tight. I hope it helps. The woman squeezed her hand and walked away, leaving Maya staring at apples that all looked exactly the same. The officers filed appeals. The union promised to fight. Nothing was final. Nothing ever was. Maya's workplace scheduled a wellness check. HR asked about stress, about accommodations. The word leave hovered in the air. I don't want to disappear, Maya said. Her manager nodded. We don't want that either. But a week later, her schedule changed. Fewer meetings, less visibility. Protection, they said. She recognized the shape of it. Containment. At night, the anxiety came in waves. Sudden, sharp, her heart racing for no reason she could name. Once, a passing siren sent her ducking behind a parked car before she realized what she was doing. She laughed then. A brittle sound. "Get together," she whispered. Therapy helped. Naming things helped. Her therapist called it a normal response to abnormal treatment. Maya clung to that phrasing. At a community forum, she stood at a podium she hadn't asked for. The room was packed, faces expectant. "I didn't plan to be here," she began. "I planned to go home that night." A murmur of agreement rippled. "Accountability isn't revenge," she continued. "It's correction, and correction requires proof." That camera was proof. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then strong. Outside, a man shouted that she was anti-police. Another woman shouted back. Maya walked past both, unwilling to become the space where their anger met. The department announced new guidelines weeks later. Clearer language, stronger documentation requirements, bodycam review audits. Daniel sent her the memo. "Your case is cited." Maya stared at her name in policy text. Reduce the precedent. That night, she dreamed she was driving again. This time, when the lights came on, she didn't pull over. She woke before she could see what happened next. On the anniversary of the stop, only months later, but it felt longer, Maya returned to Linden Street. Daytime now. Children rode bikes. A man watered his lawn. She stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the ordinary. The consequences hadn't undone the fear. They hadn't erased the nights. She replayed the footage in her mind. But they had shifted something. In the department. In the public record. In her phone buzzed. A message from a number she didn't recognize. "Because of you, I filed a complaint too." Maya typed back slowly. "I hope they listen." She put the phone away and looked up at the sky. No lights. No sirens. Just open air. The consequences, she realized, weren't only what happened to the officers. They were what happened next. And that story wasn't finished yet. Months passed, and Maya discovered that life after visibility was both quieter and louder than she had imagined. Quiet in the sense that the blue lights no longer appeared in her rearview mirror, and she wasn't being followed or called into offices at all hours. Louder because every conversation, every glance, seemed to carry the weight of what had happened. Her mornings began early, walking to work through streets that now felt familiar but never entirely safe. She noticed details she had ignored before. The cracked sidewalk where a child had tripped, the bright paint of a corner store, the way neighbors smiled politely but cautiously. Their eyes often lingered a moment too long, unsure how to treat someone who had become a public figure without intending to. At work, Maya returned to most of her old responsibilities, but her role had shifted. She was invited to workshops about implicit bias and employee safety. Her voice carried weight, and colleagues listened, though sometimes awkwardly, as if hearing a story they had previously refused to see. One afternoon, a young black woman approached her in the break room. Her hands were shaking slightly, and her eyes darted nervously. I just wanted to thank you," she said. "My experience last week, it was different because of what you did. I felt like I could speak up." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." Outside the office, Maya began volunteering at community forums, talking about her experience and offering guidance to those navigating similar encounters. She emphasized resilience, preparation, and the importance of documenting everything. She never sugarcoated the trauma or the fatigue that came with public scrutiny, but she also spoke of the small victories, the moments where truth prevailed over narrative. Therapy continued to be a lifeline. Sessions were filled with flashbacks, recurring questions, and anxiety over the simplest interactions. Yet, slowly, she learned to breathe through the panic, to recognize the triggers, and to reclaim control over her life. Social media remained both a tool and a battlefield. Messages of support still came daily, but so did criticisms and threats. She learned to navigate the digital space with careful boundaries, muting, blocking, and sometimes choosing silence as the most powerful response. One evening, She drove Linden Street again, the night calm, streetlights glowing over quiet lawns. For the first time since the stop, she didn't anticipate danger. She felt the rhythm of the road beneath her tires, heard her own breathing without panic, and let the memories of handcuffs and flashing lights fade into the background. The neighborhood had not changed entirely. Some things never did, but she had. She recognized that her courage hadn't erased fear, yet had transformed it into vigilance and clarity. She was no longer just a resident or a victim. She had become a witness, a voice, and, in a small but significant way, a force for accountability. At home, she sat by her window, writing in her journal. Names, dates, incidents, all recorded meticulously, not for revenge, not for show, but for history, for justice, for anyone who might need a guide when the lights flashed behind them. Maya's mother knocked gently on the door. "Dinner?" she asked. "Thanks," Maya replied, closing the journal. She smiled, tentative but real. Small victories, endurance, continuation. The world outside her apartment remained imperfect, messy, and unjust at times, but she was no longer powerless. Later, she called Daniel. The footage, the story, it changed things, she said. "Yes," he said. "Not everyone, not everywhere, but enough to matter." Maya leaned back in her chair. She thought of Linden Street, of the blue lights, the bodycam blinking, and the ripple that truth could create. It had cost her, but it had also given her a strange, enduring strength. She knew the system wasn't perfect, the world wasn't fair, and the consequences were never complete. But she had survived, witnessed, and acted, and sometimes that was enough. The first time Maya drove Linden Street, since everything began, it was late afternoon. Sunlight pooled across manicured lawns, painting everything in shades of gold. Children's laughter drifted from a nearby yard. A dog barked in the distance, and for a moment, the world seemed almost ordinary. She parked near the corner where it had happened. The curb was warm under her tires. She closed her eyes and exhaled, feeling the air move in and out like a pulse that belonged to her alone. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the quiet rhythm of a street that had once held terror in every shadow. Maya opened her eyes and looked down the road. The same houses, the same driveways, the same street signs, but she saw differently now. She noticed details she hadn't before. The flowers planted along the fence line, the small cracks in the pavement, a neighbor sweeping his porch. Ordinary, yet layered with new meaning. She had survived, but the memory lingered, etched into her body in ways she would carry forever. The bodycam footage, the press coverage, the hearings, and the endless online debates had left scars, but they also left proof. Proof of injustice. Proof that speaking out mattered. Proof that accountability, even if imperfect, was possible. Maya had become part of a story larger than herself, a narrative that could not be silenced or rewritten entirely. That was a gift she hadn't expected. She pulled out her phone and checked the news one last time. Updates from city officials, policy changes, commentary from journalists. Nothing perfect, nothing complete. But the officers involved faced consequences they could not evade, and a conversation had begun that would continue long after she was gone. Her mother's voice floated through her mind. "You're carrying it." Maya realized she still was, in ways both heavy and empowering. The weight of memory, the vigilance it demanded, and the courage it required. It was hers to bear, to honor, and to transform. She started the car and drove slowly down the street. Children's bicycles wobbled along the sidewalks. Neighbors waved, and the ordinary sounds of life carried on. Maya felt a strange sense of reclamation. The street had not changed, but her place in it had. She no longer felt like an intruder in her own neighborhood. She belonged fully without apology. At the corner, she stopped and glanced over her shoulder. The place where the stop had happened seemed smaller somehow, diminished by time and by her resilience. The fear remained, a shadow she would always carry, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced it, documented it, and shared it with the world. That act alone reshaped the balance of power, however slightly. Later at home, she opened her journal. Pages filled with dates, names, observations, and reflections stared back at her. This chronicle of events was more than therapy. It was testimony. Maya traced the edges of her writing with a finger, recalling the moments she had feared would define her. She closed the journal carefully and set it on the nightstand. History, she understood now, was not a passive thing. It was lived, recorded, and acted upon. Her phone buzzed. A text from someone she hadn't met in person. "Because of you, I spoke up. Thank you." Maya smiled softly. She typed back, "Keep going." A simple instruction, but a powerful one. Courage, she realized, was contagious. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon. Golden light reflected on windows, stretched shadows across lawns, and painted the ordinary world in vivid hues. Maya stood at her window, watching as life continued, messy, unjust at times, but persistent. The officers had faced consequences. The system had been under scrutiny, and she had survived it all. Still, she knew the work was ongoing. Change was never total, never instant, but it was happening. Maya's mother knocked gently on her door. "Dinner?" she asked. Maya nodded, closing her laptop and standing. Each movement felt deliberate, reclaimed. Every step was her own. She walked into the kitchen, leaving behind the small apartment where trauma, courage, and resilience had intertwined. As they ate, conversation light and ordinary, Maya felt the weight of months lift, fraction by fraction. She knew the fear would never vanish entirely, the memory of flashing lights and cold metal always lingering at the edges of her awareness. But so, too, would the knowledge that she had acted, that she had persisted, that she had made a difference, no matter how incremental. Later, alone, she returned to a window and looked out over Linden Street one last time that evening. The world outside had moved on, unaware of the small but seismic shift she had helped initiate. But for Maya, everything had changed. Her name, her story, and the record of truth she carried would remain. Proof that even in the face of injustice, exposure, persistence, and courage could create real consequences. The streetlights flickered on. Shadows stretched. Ordinary sounds continued. And Maya Thompson, still trembling slightly from months of tension and public scrutiny, finally allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Over her narrative, over her life, and over what remained of her fear. She exhaled slowly, steadily. The lights had once blinded her, but now they illuminated a path she had fought to claim. She sat there a moment longer, chest rising and falling with the quiet rhythm of reclaimed power, before turning away. Linden Street would always hold a memory, but Maya knew one undeniable truth. She had survived it, witnessed it, and endured. And that, she realized with quiet certainty, was everything that remained.